Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rechakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations be unto the Akim out here pushing this gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord, will lift up on your houses. This is Brother Quan Watt come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Lord will, it is edifying. Lord will, it is straight to the point. And this lesson, right, ultimately inspired by just listening to the brothers out here. They were doing a live stream yesterday, just a little sit down, and brothers were ultimately touching on the fact that we got a kingdom prepared for us, man. Right, Yahweh Shai said, right, as we got in this precept right here, that he goes to prepare a place for us, man, right, which is ultimately what? The kingdom of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, and Lord will, right, we be a part of the elect, right, as long as we continue to endure, right, as long as we continue to push through, right, no matter the circumstance, no matter the situation, right, we will ultimately be partakers, right, of receiving, right, that glorification, that kingdom, right along with Yahweh Shai, right, Yahweh Shai being the first and foremost, right, to receive that glory, right, to receive that rulership, right, and again, Lord will, we be part of that number, right, we'll be heirs to that promise with him, as we read in Romans the 8th chapter, man, and it's going to be glorious, right, it's going to be absolutely glorious, man, right, we're going to be able to explore the universe, right, all the different galaxies, all the different planets, right, these are things that are ultimately prepared, right, for us to be able to partake in, right, to discover, and that's a beautiful thought, right, that's a beautiful thing to meditate on, right? These are all things that Esau has tried to do, right? He tries to explore, Mars and the moon, and but that right there, hey, that's little compared to what we're going to be doing, right? Again, Lord will, we be of that number, and it's coming soon, right? We have all the different signs, right, showing us that we're at the end of this devil's rulership, right? Which, as we continue to go into, right, Second Ezra, the 6th chapter, right? Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob's the beginning of it that follows. So we ultimately got next, right? When this devil completely goes down, right, Yahweh Shai comes, and as we read in 1 Corinthians the 15th chapter, right, then cometh the end, when he shall cast down all rule, power, and authority, roughly paraphrasing, right, which is ultimately Yahweh Shai coming and removing this devil out of that power seat, right, and ultimately setting up a righteous rulership, right, which will last forever. This is what's coming. It's literally right around the corner. It's knocking at the door. So let me grab my first precept, where we'll ultimately start right here. Right, again, these are the words of Yahweh Shai, right? St. John the 14th chapter, right? It says Yahweh Shai comforts his disciples, and this is comforting, man. It's very comforting, right? And it's faith boosting, right? Being told that these things are gonna, ultimately be given unto us if we continue to endure. And we're seeing all the different signs that we were told to look for, right? That'll let us know that gift, right? The promises, right, are going to be given out soon, right? St. John 14, verse 1, it says, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in the Most High, believe also in me," right? Right? Because at the end of the day, right, we understand that there's only one way to come to the Father, and that's through Yahweh Shai. So Yahweh Shai is worthy to be praised and worshipped, man. And Salakia is ultimately, and walk and talk, if you will. So if you hear any background noise, Salakia, right? Verse 2, it says, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you." Right? Right? Now think about that, right? In my Father's house is many mansions, which, you can't really fit a mansion in a house, right? So that's not what it's talking about, man. You can't look at it You know, you have to, as you know, scriptures say, right? You got to look at things in a spiritual manner. You know, spiritual man judgeth all things, you know, spiritually. You know, roughly paraphrasing 1 Corinthians, the 2nd chapter, man. So you got to look at it spiritual, right? The Father's house is ultimately goes into, you know, the entire universe, man. Right? The entire universe, the creation, right? And then it says what? In my Father's house are many mansions, right? You go into, you know, you look at a mansion, right? A mansion, right, is basically just a really big house, right? With a whole bunch of rooms, a whole bunch of dwelling places, right? Which is ultimately what? Like a galaxy, right? And then the planets are those different rooms. You know, when you kind of break it down and you go into it, that's ultimately talking about the universe and then the different galaxies and different planets, right? That were ultimately created. You know? And this is what he's talking about, man. In my Father's house, right, are many mansions, many different galaxies, right? Those rooms being those different planets within those galaxies, man. You know, you got mansions that have 15, 20 rooms. You know, well, you got galaxies, right, such as the Milky Way, that's got billions and billions and billions of you know, planets within it, right? And these are all things that we're going to be able to explore, right? We're going to be discovering new plants, right? New fruits, you know? And it's going to be glorious, man, right? It says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know, right? Because yeah, we're going to be with Yahweh Shai, man. You know? We're going to be with Yahweh Shai, which is a beautiful part, man. But bros, hey, that's what bros want, man, to be around Yahweh Shai, man. You know, the one who started this whole thing, the one that, you know, who created us. You know, and that's what we want, man. We, you know, we continuously desire and earn and, you know, yearn, you know, to be with Yahweh Shai, man. You know, and to be heirs of that promise, man. And that's a beautiful thing, man. Right? When you look at all the things that the Lord ultimately promised to us, right? For doing what we're supposed to do, right? Really, we don't even deserve, you know, a reward, right? We're doing that which we're supposed to do, right? To serve Yahweh Shem Shai, right? To present our bodies a living sacrifice, you know? But the Lord said what? He's going to give us a reward for it, right? And that reward is what? It's going to be, you know, first and foremost, right? Having those spiritual bodies, right? Scriptures talk about our body being fashioned like unto his body, right? Having those spiritual bodies, right? Which are going to be able, right, to endure going through space, going into, you know, these, you know, we're going to be able to breathe in space, man. We're going to be able to operate, right, under the waters without having to need gills or you know, to be transformed into some type of fish or some, in order to be able to do that. No, we're not going to need these different machines that Esau has to create in order for him to go down in the depths. We're going to be able to discover it all, man. You know, because those spiritual bodies that we're going to be given, right, which are a part of that promise. This is all beautiful, man. This is all something that, you know, the Yahweh Shem Shai had promised to those, right, that love him, right, that continue to endure all the way into the end. You know? And we're gonna have to go and explore, right? Because what did the Lord say? Right? Let's grab this, Salakia. Isaiah 60, and I'll start at verse 21, right? It says, thy people also shall be all righteous, right? And this is talking about all Israelites, you know? So we understand that Zechariah 13:8 says that 2/3 of the nation of Israel is going to have to die and perish on this side, you know? But hey, they're going to come back into the kingdom, right? They're going to be born back through the loins of the elect into the kingdom, right? Into everlasting life, man, you know? And we're, as a nation, we're going to be above all the rest, right? The elect are going to be completely different, right? They're going to be a whole class in itself of the nation of Israel, but nonetheless, the nation of Israel are going to be above the rest, right? And we're going to live forever, right? We're going to have the law, statutes, commandments, right? Written in our inward parts, man. You know, we'll never, ever go off again, right? We'll be perfect, you know? And that's something that's prepared for us as well, right? Perfection, right? The rest of these nations will never, ever know what that is like, right? But we will, you know. But the point being, right, all the nation of Israel is going to be righteous, right? And we know that righteousness is immortality, pursuant to wisdom of Solomon 1:15. You know, we'll be immortals, right? It says, thy people also shall be all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. The branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified, right? Because at the end of the day, all of this is going to happen to glorify the names of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, and his only beloved begotten Son, right? Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua is going to be glorified in us, right? It says, and here's the point, verse 22, it says, a little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. I, the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, will hasten in this time, right? So we're going to continue to procreate, man, right? We're going to look, we're going to look like humans. We're going to look like, you know, the average person, not necessarily average, obviously, because, you know, we're going to be Israelites, and the Lord's going to, you know, ultimately give us our spiritual bodies, right? So we might actually have some type of glow about us, but we're going to look like we're in the flesh. But in reality, we're going to be in those spiritual bodies, right? We're not going to have no regular flesh, carnal body. No, right? We're going to have a celestial body, right? You read that in 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, it talks about the difference between a terrestrial and a celestial body, right? And Apostle Paul, even in 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, talked about that we have a tabernacle, right, in the heavens, right, in which we've grown to be in, to be clothed with, you know. So it's talking about those spiritual bodies. We are the bodies that we're going to inherit, right, are completely different than the bodies that we have now. We'll never get hurt, you know. We'll never, you know, get tired, you know. All a part of the promise, man. These are things that, you know, that are a part of that promise, right? So we're going to be, you know, again, operating, right, regularly, right? We're going to eat, we're going to drink, you know, drink water, drink yayan, you know, whatever, right? We're going to, you know, ultimately, you know, you know, walk, you know, if we want to, or fly if we want to, right? And we're going to even, you know, multiply, right? Which is part of the commandments, right? Be fruitful and multiply. And that's what we're going to do. All right. And this is what it's talking about, right? Jacob's going to be multiplying, breeding like rabbits, as they say, you know. And it's gonna get to the point where, hey, we're gonna we're gonna have to move on, right? We're gonna have to go and explore other planets, right? You read that in Isaiah, the 49th chapter, Isaiah 49, outside of verse 16, it says, "Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands; thy walls are continually before me. Thy children shall make haste; thy destroyers and they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee." Right? It says, "Lift up thine eyes round about, and behold, all these gather themselves together and come to thee. As I live, saith Yahweh, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all, and as an ointment, and bind them on thee as a bride doeth. For thy waste and thy desolate places and the land of thy destruction shall even now be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants, and they that swallow thee up shall be far away." Right? And here's the point. That the children which thou shalt have after thou hast lost the other shall say again in thine ears, "This place is too straight for me. Give place to me that I may dwell." Right? So we're gonna have to, you know, we're gonna have all these kids. You know, we're gonna need to move on. You know, we're gonna need to move on, man. There's gonna be too many, right? Because, you know, again, Jake breed like rabbits, right? And the Lord said He will hasten in His time. So it's not gonna take forever, right? It's not gonna take 20,000 years. You know. Hey, the Lord might have it happen in the first 1,000, you know, the first 500, you know, how Jake be breeding, man, you know, which we'll know when we get to the kingdom, right? I'm just throwing a number out there, you know, but nonetheless, right, the Lord is going to hasten in His time, man, and we're going to need to go. We're going to need to move around, you know, all these different planets to discover. Hey, the Lord said what? Enjoy that which I create for all eternity. Let's go to that too. Isaiah, the 65th chapter, around the 17th verse. Right here, it says, "New heavens and a new earth." It says, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth." Right? It's not going into, you know, an actual new whole planet, right? That we're going to have, you know, we're going to get delivered. The whole planet's going to get destroyed, and, you know, we'll go. No, that's not going to happen. Right? That's not going to happen. Right? Because at that point, who would be enslaved? Right? Because then at that point, you would say, or that would open up the door or confirm that the heathens would be delivered too, because they would have to be delivered from the destruction of the entire planet, which is not true. There's no salvation. Nowhere does it talk about any of the heathens being delivered on chariots, while the planet is being destroyed. No, scriptures don't say that, man. Right? It's talking about the earth being renewed, right? Revamped, being brought back into the state in which it was supposed to be in the first place. Right? That's what it's talking about, right? It says, for behold, I created new heavens and new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind, right? Because we're not going to be worried about this, right? This level of this captivity, the state in which the world is in. Man, that's the thing of the past, bro. We ain't going to worry about this shit. We're going to be worried about the things that the Lord ultimately, gave to us, man. It says, but be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. It's going to take all eternity to discover, right? Because they have a saying, right, that with science, when dealing with the universe, it's ever being created, right? The universe is always growing, right? It doesn't stop. The universe continues to grow, right? So there's new planets, new animals, all these different things that are being created, man, right? By the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, through His only beloved begotten Son, and we're just ultimately waiting, right, to ultimately go and discover those things, man. Right? It says, but be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. So we're going to be rejoicing forever, man. We're going to always be in joy. It's going to be a beautiful thing, right? It says, for behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. Right? It says, and I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people, and the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. Right? Because we're going to be good, man. We're going to be good, right? We're not going to be in this position anymore. It says, there shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed, right? They shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. And again, right, dealing with these different planets, right? We're going to be, setting up shop, on these different planets, or having kids on these different planets, and going and conquering and inhabiting different planets as we continue to go and continue to grow. Right? Again, different fruits, different atmospheres. Right? I was watching in the TV show, what is that? Invincible. Right? And you go and when they start to go to these different planets, and whatnot, you see the different atmospheres and the landscape is different, and so on and so forth, right? As you continue to watch, that TV show, right? It shows you different atmospheres. There's one where the gravity was so dense, right, that they couldn't, they're used to flying at sonic speeds, man. But the atmosphere was so dense they couldn't even really fly like that. It was like a super slow fly, until they got to the outer atmosphere of that planet, and then they were able to, be normal. So it's like we're going to be discovering, and then who knows, man, right? That's just, within these TV shows and so on and so forth. But the point was, right, there's different atmospheres, different, landscapes, different, all these different things that we see, and that the major four elements, right? Fire, water, earth, air, right? We think about those things here on earth, right? Because that's the main things. But, hey, they could be completely different on a whole different planet, and we're going to be able to discover all those things, man. Right? It says verse 21, it says, and they shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. They shall not build and another inhabit, they shall not plant and another eat. For as the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. Right? I mean, we're going to be, we'll never die, right? We'll always be in joy, right? We're gonna be the lender and not the borrower, as the scripture saying in Deuteronomy 28th chapter, right? We'll always be on top, right? It says they shall not labor in vain nor bring forth trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, and their offspring with them, right? Our children, right? It says, and it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear, right? We're gonna have everything that our hearts desire, man. Everything. Before we even ask for it, the Lord's going to give it to us, man. It says, the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and the dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, saith the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. So everything's going to be completely different, man. Completely different. Right? You got prey and predator here, on earth, but those same animals, right, that are prey or predator one to another, and they're gonna be able to lay together, play together, chill. You know, a lion is going to be able to play with a badger. A bear is going to be able to play with the fish. You know, and so on and so forth. Right, just to name a couple. You know, or the lion and the antelope. You know, the alligator and the antelope or the deer or whatever it may be, right? The predator with the prey, right? They're all going to be able to chill, right? A fox and a rabbit, a wolf and a lamb, as it says, you know, all going to be able to chill and not going to be fighting, not going to be killing one another. It's going to be completely different, man. And this is what we're, continuing to, to look forward to, right? And these are things that as we continue to, go about our day to day that we meditate on, right, that help us, right, to stay focused, right, to focus on what is approaching, We understand that we're, Jacob's trouble is around the corner, right, the hour of temptation where our faith is going to be tested, right? But just like Yahweh Shai, we have that joy set before us, which will help, and aid in us being able to endure because we know what's coming, right? We know that, the reward, right, of pushing through, right, and staying faithful, right, and again, Lord will be at that number. This is what's coming to those who are faithful, those who remain faithful, man, So just continue to push through, man. Continue to trust and believe in Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai, and Lord will be part of the elect. Hey, we're gonna receive these promises, man, and we're gonna be those that have the first dominion, right? Those who are of the first ones to go and explore, And that's a blessing in itself, man, But I was just meditating on that this morning, man. Lord wills, edifying, Lord, straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rechak, Wadash, Double R, to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the great millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.